Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Psyched to be with you, with me, your host, Christopher Lee, aka Chimp195. We're back. It's more Psyched to be with you by more blind psyche content that I know you've all been craving since the last episode. This is episode 8. Summer is at its zenith. I'm going to pretend like it's not winter in the UK at the moment, and we're going to have a delightful, and dare I say even wholesome, chat with my guest today. So I'm very excited. Do please grab a beverage, sit somewhere comfortable. Lay down if you like. Don't fall asleep during a podcast. That's very good. And let's get into it. My very special guest, if you could please introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, actually, I also have a cozy beverage here. I'm ready to go. My name is Jenny Windom. Folks may also know me through my handle Kimchika online. And I do a variety of things, but primarily they all rest within the community curation and influencer management spaces. Really, at my core, I'm just really passionate about game curation, helping people find the games that they connect with and they love, and I hope to be someone who helps encourage people to think about the whys and hows of, why do they love the games they play? What can they learn from them about themselves? And what can we learn about the world around us through how we play? So, very excited, very psyched to be here.
Ah, you did the, we did the
Hey, I
thing.
did it. I couldn't resist. I had to.
Okay, all right. So there's so much I want to just gobble up from that intro alone, because I think obviously my background's psychology. There's a lot like in ed psych around what games can teach us and how we can learn. But I really want to. You
Mhm.
used a word, and I love words. I've literally got a word a day calendar over here. Um, you said curate. Now, curation specific. I feel like when people hear that, they think of museums or art galleries. Can you
Mm.
tell us what that
Mhm.
means in relation to games?
Yeah, I think it's no secret that there are a huge number of games for people to enjoy right now, which is a blessing and a curse. And what I found is really my passion. I used to actually be a teacher. I was a middle school teacher, I was a high school teacher, and I loved being able to help select the books for the lit circles that my students would read, both to hopefully expand their points of view, but also to help them really find themselves or see themselves in the media that they consume. And so I come to game curation with a similar mindset where I really believe that I think everyone has a game or games that they really will connect with, and my goal is to allow everyone who wants to play and who wants to be a part of this game industry in whatever capacity, but specifically as players, they understand that they have places where they can find games that resonate with them on a variety of levels. And so my hope, particularly, it's while I'm known maybe more for my more like wholesome and cozy curation and recommendations to help people find games that I think are doing amazing things in the space, both from the mechanical side, the narrative side, and even on the studio side of things. I actually am very proud that I go beyond sort of that wholesome genre, and I do curate other titles as well. But I think most people will know me for maybe the more wholesome, cozy elements.
Now, this is gonna sound bougie, and it's said with all the love in the world, but like I feel like there's something that sounds so elite around. Like, imagine someone be like,
Mm.
Jenny, I don't know what to play. Curate me a game. Here's the backlog. What should I play? Something about that sounds like so like boutique,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and I think it kind of is. I think in a lot of ways, there's no avoiding it, but I think there's an element of, especially for people who have not been able to find games that resonate with them, who have not been able to find games that speak to them or that show the representation they would like to see in the media they play. I think that curation is really significant and important. So while it can seem, and perhaps on a level is sort of this like sort of nose turned up practice, I think there's value to it. And I think it's really important because we have so much that we can engage with to have someone like ultimately curation. at its core is someone telling you that they like something and why, and hoping that you connect with it on a similar level as well. And so, really, I think for me, it's about helping people parse through the vast amount of information we get and hopefully providing a space where they feel like they can consistently come to and see things that they enjoy.
And I think, I joked about it sounding bougie, but you
Yeah.
really you really hit the nail on the head there. It's about like helping people because there's so much, right? I think
Mhm.
I had a stat that's like, I think is it like 150 games added to Steam every day or something.
Yeah, it's
It's
wild.
enormous number. How much of them are, adult novels, visual novels? That probably takes a good percentage. I'm not dissing those. I'm just saying they seem to make up a large proportion. Anyhow,
Mhm.
so I think that's great. I also, and this again, maybe I'm trying to make it sound spicy than it is. How does one manage an influencer? Because that to me is like trying to tame the wind.
It's kind of funny because I've had my own sort of, struggles with that title. I was actually recently asking and questioning and seeing if I could change it to something more of like relations and strategy because that is much more of what I'm doing. Um, Managing in the sense that, sure, I guess I manage my inbox, and I manage a lot of questions, but I think more what I do, is involves building relationships, engaging with creators, seeing what they enjoy, seeing what they don't enjoy, and then, with the companies that I work with, and right at this point of time in recording, I'm working with Kepler Interactive. um, I really try to think about how can we best strategically reach out to these creators so that the developers are getting as much visibility as possible, but that these creators are also seeing benefits as well. Like, hopefully, like the ideal situation for me is a creator comes back and says, "Oh my gosh, I've been playing your games and it's actually helped me grow my community. Like, I found a whole new group of people who enjoy watching me because of this game." When that sort of level of connection happens between a player, the game, and their community, like, that's what I look for and I really enjoy the most. So, I think influencer manager is a given title, but I prefer to think of it as, like, strategy and relations more than
Hey, but
anything.
where do you sign up? Totally not asking for a friend. Just like
Yeah.
uh,
I can submit this to the HR team is my petition for that.
um, okay, that's excellent. I also then kind of let's talk about wholesome games. I was
Mhm.
trying to ponder this before. I feel like we've known each other in this space for a while, and I
Yeah.
believe originally you were due to be on a PAX East panel, and then you couldn't make it for external reasons. And then we just kind of like stayed in touch, and then we were eventually on a panel at PAX West,
Yeah.
23, just gone. Good grief, what games can teach us about loss? Exceptional panel, by the way. Um, but yeah, and like I feel I can't. I think it was the wholesome games that kind of brought us together because who doesn't
Mhm.
love wholesome games? Wholesome games overlap very much with the sort of things that I'm interested in regarding like mental health and representation and accessibility that I kind of generally cover. What's wholesome
Mhm.
games, Jenny? Break it down.
It's like asking what's an indie game, on some level, I think. Um, it's interesting because I think as we've had these conversations, I really like to delineate between wholesome and cozy.
Mm-hmm.
I think cozy is a much more broad and ambiguous definition, in the sense that coziness is such a personal thing. And so you can decide for yourself what feels cozy, what does not. And I think that's something that I like to say is much more relegated to, like, you make cozy what it is for you. I think wholesome, at least for me, has, and in the way that we as like Wholesome Games, the organization has used it, is a bit more specific in that these are games that are, yes, very cozy and oftentimes very cute, but I think there's a deeper underlying message, oftentimes that we look for that, may not necessarily feel cozy on the surface. I think games like Spiritfarer, for example, where you grasp and you deal with uncomfortable topics that perhaps are not inherently cozy. Maybe they're inherently a little bit uncomfortable, but wholesome games oftentimes can provide spaces where you can explore uncomfortable things quite safely. And so I think there's a little bit more. Um, there's a little bit more compassion in these games, that at least personally, as I'm curating, that's what I'm thinking through. It's not simply about being cute, not simply about being cozy. There are ideally a whole other swath of elements that these games are addressing, above and beyond that.
I mean, we could let's not derail the episode by talking about what is genre and classifying
Yeah.
games and how that's basically
What are
impossible.
words? Yeah.
Yeah, like just pointless conjecture,
Yeah.
right? But I
Yeah.
really enjoy that separation because I think, and this is actually another panel I was on at West, weirdly enough, but like cozy in chaos, and it's this idea that like what
Mhm.
I take comfort from and therefore feel cozy doing might be different to yourself, and that might go against the traditional kind of conception of what that means. So like
Right.
I've been playing a lot of Resident Evil lately. Um, Not what one might typically describe as cozy, and yet that immersion and that kind of like ability to
Mhm.
fend the zombies, like was in its way quite cozy. It was very comfort kind of driven. It's like, oh, this is
Mhm.
quite nice because it was like in a sense, I'm gonna say predictable. Like I knew what I was gonna get, right, and that
Yeah.
was what provided me with that cozy feeling.
Yeah, I think and if we wanted to, which this could be a whole other discussion, I feel like, but I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, knowing that in reality, a lot of it is semantics, and ultimately, that's not how people play. But I think a lot about the difference between, for example, flow and coziness and like wholesomeness and sort of what I conceptualize them as. Because I think also to some people, like I feel like when I play Tetris, I just into a flow. And I don't necessarily find that cozy, but I find that repetition and that like pattern really um just like something that I can just zone out with.
Hmm.
But I don't call it cozy. But I was talking to someone else and they're like, no, for me, flow is cozy. Like that's the thing that really captures it for me. And so I think a lot about these words, knowing that it's very armchair, you know, armchair anthropologist kind of to a certain extent, but I think it's nice to start like as thought exercises. I think it's nice to think about.
Flow is so interesting as well from like an academic kind of position because my
Mm.
PhD supervisor actually studied flow for her PhD and like trying to like understand like what even is a flow state and how is that created in games is so fascinating. And I think like yeah, you're right. I think there maybe is a link to the way people feel or perceive when they're in flow as comfort
Mhm.
as opposed to like being wrapped up in a blanket with a cozy beverage, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's a delineation that again, it's like, does anyone actually really, when they're playing a game, sit and think about it? Probably not, except maybe for me, and maybe you and your PhD advisor. But I don't know, I find it fascinating because I think the way that games make us feel is really interesting, compared to other mediums, especially. I'm very passionate about that, and so I think just it's really nice to think about sometimes.
Yeah, I think like I really am derailing it. We'll just go with it. But I think like I read again. I'm a nerd. This happens. Someone got me like an encyclopedia of human emotion as a gift. It was a book,
That sounds
and
really
like
cool.
it talks about like happiness and how happiness is different from joy, and what makes happiness is that you don't if you think about happiness you lose it, right? Because like
Mm,
happiness is like a thing that happens in that moment. It's like you're at the sports ball that you're a fan of and your team is winning. Like it's all you think about, it's all you focus about for however long that is, right? And for me it's
mhm,
soccer slash football. In that 90 minutes all that matters, right? When you're playing a game and like this is all that you're focusing on, and
mm.
like that coziness of flow kind of feed into that spectrum of feeling for me, and that like as soon as you start to think about it you kind of plop yourself out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you mentioned, like, it's a spectrum of feeling. I think that's something that gets lost oftentimes in these conversations where, I am very often asked, like, "What is wholesome? What's an indie?" Like, what are these things that you're trying to categorize? I also think it's interesting that we don't necessarily do the same thing with other genres. There's an element of it, but it's less mechanical. Like, I think this is maybe one of the first more aesthetic aesthetically motivated conversations that
Hmm.
I've really had in games, at least again in my experience. But I love that the spectrum element is there because that's actually what ended up happening a long time ago for in the wholesome games like community and discord. There was an attempt to be like, what if we created a rubric? What if we did something that helped like really quantitatively, qualitatively put it down, like what is wholesome? And it was kind of impossible to an extent. Like there are some hard lines that we can draw, it's like no racism, the
Hmm.
games with overt like colonialist themes, that's not very wholesome to us. But um it does become much more of a spectrum, which I think is again, it's like ultimately it's more about the enjoyment of the thing rather than hard definitions. But
And precisely why we need people like yourself curating these games. Am I right? Like,
I
hey,
mean, I love that. Is keep me in a job.
100%. That's what this show is all about.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
so tell us then, like, what does wholesome games do? How does it function?
Yeah, I think again the biggest thing that we do is we curate games. We specifically like to highlight again, we use the phrase like joyful, compassionate, kind, and uplifting games. But really we emerged out of a really organic need for connection. The founders, Matthew and James, they had started this Twitter account because they loved this kind of game and they were like, we don't really know anyone else who's doing this and highlighting games of this type. I connected with them because I also at the time was creating content around this sort of genre, this sort of feeling of games, but I didn't have words at the time to put to it. But I just knew that we were doing the same thing and we were like, hey, we should find ways to work together. And it really grew out of this need for community and connection. And I think when I think about wholesome games, I think on the surface it is like, yes, we're going to curate games, but the more I kind of absorb what do we do is we provide that space for community and a feeling of belonging for people who did not originally necessarily feel like they belonged in games.
And there's also like these kind of because it's also about like celebrating games and giving space to the games as well as the people wanting to
Hmm.
play them. Because the whole
Yeah.
wholesome snacks, is that
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Get snacks and directs. Yeah.
What are those?
So those are our annual showcases. So the Wholesome Direct is our summer showcase. This is what we do. It's our big showcase. It's an hour long typically, and we really again try to highlight some of the games that we think the community would be most interested in. What's really nice is we've been doing this for many years now, and so we have the opportunity to not only highlight games that folks may have heard about or maybe have not seen but have been announced. But we've had the opportunity now multiple times to announce games, which is a huge privilege. And I honestly think about it all the time that like developers trust us with these announcements because it's a big deal to announce your game. Like that's a beat that you want to make sure to hit really strongly. And the fact that some developers are like, we trust you to do this and be the person to carry this is like, or the people to carry this is amazing. And the snack is our winter version of the showcase. So it originally began as a sort of an update to say, hey, here are the games from the direct. We just wanted to let you know how they're going. Some maybe a couple of new updates, announcements, but nothing too big. It has started growing as well. We are getting more new reveals at the snack as well. So while it's still about 30 minutes ish, um, that is a jam packed 30 minutes because, again, it's like I think the momentum is still growing for the community, which is great.
And from the viewership side, I think like listen, there are lots of back in my day we had E3, that was the big game. R.I.P. Gone and forgotten. You know what I mean? And I feel like the way we receive game news has changed so vastly.
Hmm.
And I think what I enjoy about like the wholesome directs and snacks is that like because it's curated content, I know I'm likely to enjoy it, right?
Hmm.
Like even though there are like like I'll watch say like a Nintendo Direct, and like a trailer will come on for a game I know is just not for me. That's fine, it's not a problem.
Hmm.
But there's almost like that joy of just seeing like oh look at this really cool, wholesome game that I haven't heard of. Might not be for me, but I'm sure someone else is gonna love it. Like that brings me joy.
Mhm. Yeah, one of the biggest points of feedback that I've really loved, as we've been doing the directs is folks saying that this is a show where they are like, I feel like every game was made for me, or the vast majority of games were made for me. I think, again, it's about creating a space that people feel like they are excited to be in, that they feel accepted to be a part of, and um, that hasn't historically been the case in the games industry, and so it's really nice to get that feedback in particular. I think, what's great is we've learned from a lot of like, the Nintendo Direct was a huge inspiration to us, in terms of structure and formatting, so I think what's really cool is, being able to learn from like these giants, like the E3s, the Nintendo Directs, the Xbox showcases, and seeing how also the emergence of a lot of these smaller showcases has impacted some of the larger showcases and sort of the practices and what they do. So,
And
yeah.
you'd never like, I don't know, have a strictly male based awards program that, like, like you never do anything silly like that.
Yeah,
Imagine.
I feel like that maybe has already been demographic that maybe has already been served a little bit.
This is maybe a bit of a spicy question, but wholesome awards, maybe someday soon.
I mean, I would not put like it's as of right now, this recording, we don't have any plans for that, but honestly, I would love to see. I am open to any ways that we can continue to, like, just celebrate these games. Wholesome awards would be super cool. We have a lot of ideas, and I know we've gotten a lot of feedback from folks wanting to see different things from Wholesome, so right now, we're kind of at a point where we're just like, "Okay, we want to do this right, and we want to like grow slowly and sustainably, so just figuring out sort of what our next steps are going to be is the next step, but I will duly noted.
Wholesome, you heard it here first. Whenever that is, in really, this will go out like in like March. Wholesome awards will get announced, and people will be like, "What are these guys
There we
talking
go.
about?" Like, um, so I think again, this is awkward because of the time and the podcast and stuff. But like, is there anything that like you've worked on recently that you're sort of like you are happy with your contribution towards? Like, you don't just be like, this game's
um
coming out next week, but 3 months ago when this goes out.
yeah, I think it's interesting. So this is a little bit of like a self plug. I don't know. I've been working on a project that I'm quite proud of and very passionate about that has nothing to do with like my day job. It's something that I've been wanting to do as a former teacher who misses the classroom, but doesn't necessarily want to go back to teaching in the classroom, who very much loves being in the game industry. Uh, I have this side project right now called Geeks and Grounds. And it was born of my love of book clubs
Mm-hmm.
and video games and like the vibe that you get when you're in a cafe and you're just like hanging out with friends and you've been playing the same game. And so you start talking about it and you can like really get into sort of why you loved it, or why you didn't love it, which is always really fun. And I realized I really wanted that from just for myself, very selfishly. And so I founded this club that's basically a video game book club where every month we have a game. It brings in my curation elements. We have half the games are selected by the community, half are curated by myself. So there's a mix of community choice as well as like, here, let me introduce you to something that you may not have played before or may not have heard of before. And we just discuss the game in Discord every month. And we have like a little forum that we do. And I have a co host of a podcast. And for folks who maybe are Discord averse or don't want to be in another server, they can listen to the podcast and sort of get a sense of the conversation through that and like email, if they would like to email. So that's something I'm really, really proud of, because it's not my work. It's just something that I like love doing and it's letting the teacher in me feel a little bit more fulfilled.
Uh, take my money. Love the idea. Premise is amazing. Yes, here for it. Again, I just think like what I love about that is that you've gone. I have a very particular set of skills, and I'm going to use them exceptionally well.
I try. It's one of those things where, as many passion projects, it's like, "Oh, I wish I had more time in the day to really, like, dig in." But it's been very fun, and I think what's really nice is, again, a lot of it is very selfish. I wanted to just get a group of people to play the same games I'm playing, so I have people to talk about the game with, but also it's been really lovely because with the community we have, it's small but mighty because folks will come in and say things that they're getting out of the games that I would have never gotten. I think even discussion I had with my co-host with our last podcast, which will be a few months out from this recording, but we were playing One Shot, and as someone who did not grow up in a very religious household, I didn't have a lot of like, I went to Sunday school when I was very little, but, like,
Mhm.
my working memory does not involve a lot of or really any sort of religious connection, and he grew up in a very religious household, and he was able to bring some context to this game and some of the symbolism that I did not appreciate and did not understand until he was able to talk with me about it, and it was so cool because 'cause I'm thinking, I would have played this game so differently. I would have thought about this game so differently had I not had this additional context that you brought in. And it's just been really cool and rewarding for me on a personal level for that reason, as well as seeing what other people are getting out of the conversations.
I'm here for it. I'm here for it. No,
Yeah.
that's. I mean, that's good. You very much smashed the question. You know what I mean? Like
Thanks. Yes.
that's
The
that's what
the
we want.
overachiever in me is excited.
And like, no, it's nice to hear that you are proud of something that you enjoy. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes I
Hmm.
feel like you do a
Yeah.
thing with work and you're like, right, it's done, cool, on to the next. It's like celebrating something that you actively enjoy is also really good.
Yeah, and I think well, one of the things that I think and sorry, just to add
That's fine.
because this has gotten me thinking about, one of my goals this year in particular was to find things I was proud of that wasn't related to my job.
Mhm.
Because I think one thing that I personally have struggled with in this industry in particular is tying personal worth to job success. And so, uh while some may argue this is just another a job by another name, I think for me, because it is such a personal project and it's something that's tied to me alone and not my work, I feel very happy that I've been able to find this outlet because I think the industry also really takes advantage of people who really connect their self worth to their job, as any passion industry does. So that's been a goal. So I'm very happy to be able to share that as a point of pride.
Let's get into some kind of crunchy business then, because this is
Mm,
something I
mhm.
love to talk about, and I feel like you're gonna resonate with this as a conversation. But part of the reason I do this show is because we define ourselves often by what we do, right? And like
Mhm.
the other half of the questions we'll get to is what do you do outside that, and this kind of feeds in. So it's really interesting that, as you say, the industry kind of very much reaps the rewards from people that care about it. And Nick Cave, musician, he sort of makes this argument that by defining ourselves by our careers, we're actually being really self limiting because we're so
Mm,
dynamic and diverse and dimensional, right? And it's
mhm.
this interesting thing of like, should you do a job that you're good at, but you don't necessarily care about because you're good at it, so it's not hard, because that will allow you to pursue your passion projects? Or if you do something, they say if you do a job you care about, you'll never work a day in your life. But like that actually being very difficult and that's very hard to maintain and that
Mhm.
kind of spoiling the joy that you had. And the example I
Mhm.
heard when this sort of I initially picked up this kind of philosophy, I guess, was like, if you're really passionate about being a DJ, if you want to try and make that your career, it's going to be very hard. We'll say streaming, it's a bit more relevant. But if you like, right, I want to be a full time streamer, that's going to be really hard to just do off the ground, right, from day naught.
Right.
Whereas doing a day job that like is within your skill remit, you don't necessarily love it, but you can do it. It pays your bills, and that allows you to stream 2 or 3 times a week. But you love what you do. Is that not better?
Mm.
That was almost a question, but also an essay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I guess if we're saying it's tough because I think it is such a highly contextual and personal decision. I can say for myself, especially having grown up with money security being a thing, in a single parent household, for me, I have always gone the way of security first,
Hmm.
and then what can we do from there? Just because that's just the background that I grew up in. I've been quite lucky though, because the I have always been able to somehow find work in industries I'm passionate about that have provided some semblance of security, which I know is definitely for both education for teachers and for game industry folks. Those are, I think, two industries notorious for not necessarily having either the best security or the best pay or any of that.
Hmm.
Um, so I think I've just been quite lucky in a lot of respects. So much of this industry is being at the right place in the right time and talking to the right people. And so that definitely colors my answer. But I've always been a find your security first, find your passion and fund your passions, so that you can perhaps eventually make the moves that you would like to make. I don't know if that answers the semi question, but
No, it does, and
I
I
think
I'm
that's yeah.
really grateful for the context. I think that is important. I come from a similar background myself. I'm very quick to
Mhm.
define myself as like a working class person from the Liverpool area. That
Yeah.
there's socio political things there, there's geographical political things in there as well. But like, I think it does shape the way that you maneuver within the corporate world, if you will.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
I think okay. Let me ask it in a more playful way then. If you could earn, I'm going to say the same money that you do from your day job from doing the um, game book club and podcast that
Yeah.
goes with it, would you quit your job? This is purely theoretical. No one get
Yeah.
mad.
My boss is listening like, "What?" I mean, absolutely. I think I also just again, just to add, I like context. That's just something for me. I'm a context-driven person. Um, I do believe for myself that alignment with what I do and my values and what I would like to see happen in the world is very strongly tied. Have a very hard time working at places that don't allow for that fulfillment.
Hmm.
And again, I know I'm lucky because I'm at the point in my career where I can make those calls. I know folks like my partner, he's much more like, I would rather work somewhere that's secure. I don't have to think about it when I leave, and I can just separate that. For me, that's not really the case. So if I could make the same money doing my passion project of a video game book club, absolutely, I would.
Okay, no, fair enough.
Yeah.
It was purely hypothetical because this, I can't remember which episode I mentioned this on because I don't think it's actually gone out yet. But this idea of like, if let's just say communism works, and in practice it doesn't. But like, would you do the job you're doing if everyone was paid the same, right? Like, would
Mhm.
people actually all stream full time if it paid the same? Like, like there's this kind of like element of like, are people doing it because this is what they need to do to exist in a
Mhm.
capitalistic society? Like, but would they keep doing it, right?
Yeah.
And it's just such an interesting, like, cyclical measure. Because I think, yeah, you're right. Like, the benefit of being able to do something that aligns with your values, I think, is a little bit easier to, in my experience, manage. Because you're like, yeah, like
Mhm.
at least like my heart is in the right place, and like that's important to me, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, for me, it is very much and again, I am lucky enough that the work I get to do via Soft Not Week, Kepler, Wholesome Games, like, I do feel like there is strong alignment there, so, um, I'm lucky in that sense, but I'm a firm believer of I think, if you can sustainably follow your passions and for you, if that is again, sustainably not just means monetarily, but
Hmm.
energy wise. Cause I think from one conversation I've had with folks is why don't you become a full time streamer? Cause I used to do much more content creation. I do it as a hobby now, because while I love it, I just know for me it's not a sustainable thing. if I were to do it full time. So I think it's a lot of it's really knowing yourself, which is why this question is such an interesting and challenging one to answer, because it's so highly personal. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I chat mints on the show. That's what we do. I would also. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I love
say.
it.
I agree entirely though. I for a fact could not be a full time streamer. I just couldn't.
Mhm.
Like I like playing games when I get the chance to, but I couldn't do it as like a job. Like
Mhm.
if I was going to be a full time streamer, right? Like I don't think I could do it. I think I would very quickly become dissatisfied with like the
Yeah.
games, and that's not what I want when they're my principal form of enjoyment, right? Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think the lesson here, ladies, gents, and them's, is know yourself. Really center and then go from there. You know.
Yep. Know thyself. Very philosophical.
I this is like such like an
Taking it
enriching
back.
conversation. Like it's so good. Let's lower the brow and be like, okay, what do you do when you're not doing work or all these amazing passion projects and like really good stuff?
Um, so before sort of lockdown happened, everything sort of shifted. I was also a dancer, semi-professionally. I taught dance regularly, most evenings a week. I also was a part of a contemporary dance group as well as a burlesque dance group. And we did performances and it was great. Now I've eased back on that, but I'm slowly kind of dipping my toes back in and hoping to get back into training currently and hoping to get back into performance soon. And so, yeah, burlesque dance and contemporary dance are the other things that I really love to do.
And
So very physical, very
what
contrasting to the game world.
for those that don't know, what are those things? Because I feel like contemporary and like people are gonna have an instant stereotype for like burlesque is,
Yeah.
right? What are those?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess contemporary, it's more of a contemporary fusion between hip hop, I would say, and contemporary, where I've trained particularly in street styles. So for any folks familiar with like whacking, with Vogue, and with house, those are the three hip hop styles I've primarily changed trained in. I guess those are not hip hop, but those are the street styles I've trained
Hmm.
in. Contemporary, I've done much more. I actually started dancing as an adult, really. So I didn't grow up with like a ballet class training or anything. I just went to contemporary classes, which is more technical. But honestly, defining contemporary feels like defining wholesome. I'm not gonna lie. It's one of the I don't
like
I'm
defining pop, right? Like pop music,
yeah,
like
it's a bit more just like lyrical movement. It's a bit more flowy movement, I guess, just to give a quick overview for the layperson.
you
Any
if we're bopping into the club, you're gonna be busting a birth. That's what we're saying.
I mean, here's the thing. I feel like I could, but I it's one of those things that as soon as someone's like, "Oh, you're a dancer, you should dance." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, the pressure."
I do the
But
same
yeah.
thing with the whole like white guy beard acoustic guitar thing. Like I love to do it, and then people's like, "Do you want to play a song?" And I'm like, "No, there's no
Yeah, I'm
campfire."
like, "Oh, yeah, yeah." I'm like, "You should definitely play a song and sing." Um Yeah, but I definitely I do love dance. With burlesque, I trained in pole, but I've never gotten to perform. But I do. It's more of like cabaret, so it's like I don't even know how to describe it. It's um, really just embracing sexuality and just embracing, for me, an element of like femininity. Again, burlesque for every person is a little bit different depending on your persona and what you want to exude to your audience. But for me, it's really about embracing a level of like hyper femininity that I really love to explore. And so for me, that's what burlesque is. Again, every person's going to dance a little differently and take on a different persona. But I've missed performing, and that's something that I'm really hoping to get back into as I'm training this year.
Hmm. Well, good. We
Yeah.
like to manifest it. Like to really
Yeah,
bring that
exactly.
energy. What are you kind of are you playing anything when you're not doing it? And I'm gonna exclude the passion project stuff. Do you ever just like steal a little hour away playing something?
Absolutely, yes. I actually just got done with a game that I feel like you would perhaps enjoy quite a bit, especially as an RPG fan. It's called In Stars and Time. It's outstanding. I think anyone who loves a good turn-based battle system, pretty simple turn-based battle system, but also very strong character
Wait,
arcs
wait,
needs
wait.
to
Is
play.
this hold on, wait. Some a previous guest told me about this actually. Laura K. Dale.
Oh my
Um
gosh.
isn't there like a you go into the dungeon with the big bad and then like there's some like looping kind of stuff and like there
Yes.
was not spoilers but like she was very excited about it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I will also not spoil. I will just say, to add on to Laura's recommendation, it is perhaps one of the best games I've played in ages. It's up there with me with some of my all-time favorites. So I just cannot recommend it highly enough. I think I felt like total joy, and there were times in that game where I could feel just the despair that the characters were feeling. It was outstanding. I can't recommend a game highly enough.
Okay. All right. I mean, sold.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I stole your thunder a little bit there. That was unintentional. I was meant to be like, "No, I've heard of this." Um
No, I think that's great. I think the fact that more people are talking about it is wonderful because it's one of those where it launched in, I believe it was like it was November of 2023, which is a tough time to launch because the holidays are happening. Big AAAs are kind of getting a bit more attention. The award show circuit is going on. And so when it launched, I was so overjoyed because I'd been really looking forward to it. And then the second thought, especially as a person who does like marketing in games, I was like, I hope people pay attention to it because it's so good. And I'm very happy to hear other people have also recommended it.
is there something that you're excited to play next?
Oh, that's really tough. I have been I'm currently playing it, but I've just started Slay the Princess,
Hmm.
which I've been so excited about. Just I have not had carved the time, and I am loving it so far. I'm just about 2 hours in, so very early, but enough to know that this is a game that's going to be very good.
That's another game that like is like on my radar. I'm like desperately trying to knock a few chips off the old backlog before Rebirth comes out, like
Yeah,
at the end of this month at the time of
same.
recording. Like, so I'm like just like right, boom, boom. I finished Death's Door recently. Like,
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
it's a very good game, very well
Yeah.
polished. Um,
That's exactly what I said. I said, "This is maybe one of the most polished indies I've played," and when I had played it, it was very good.
it just like it knows what it's doing. It does it
Mhm.
well. The execution is fantastic. The story is also genuinely quite good. Like like
Yes.
you like yeah, you the hacky slashy dodgy, but like actually like all of the components just meld perfectly.
Mhm. And I love it because it was one of those games where, Tunic did something similar where it has the aura of something much more whimsical, but when you play it, it's actually quite a challenging game, kind of when you get down to it. There's a Souls-like vibe
Hmm.
to it. And I really appreciate that, this sort of juxtaposition between like, especially with Death's Door, where I was like, oh, it's a whimsical, like over the garden wall kind of world. Like this feels so charming. And then you play and you're like, oh, I have to actually pay attention to what's going on in this.
And then like we won't spoil, but like and then like the story happens, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
oh, and then like
Yeah.
I don't know about you, and again, we'll keep it spoiler free, but I decided to 100% it, so I did the post game,
Yeah.
and then there
Oh
were
my gosh, yes.
feels, and then I was like, well played game, well played.
Yeah. I love that, and I think that for me is what's most exciting when you discover a game that not only has, like, that mechanical component that's so strong, but then the narrative element and the themes, you're like, "Oh, we can have our cake and eat it too." It's amazing. Oh, I love that, yeah.
And it's broadly, I would say, death positive, which I think is also great.
I agree, yeah. I would say, and for me, again, this is one of the more maybe sort of edgy picks, I would say, but I would say for me, this is erring more on the side of wholesome, even with the challenging combat element, which I'm actually, now that I'm saying, I'm wondering if they have accessibility options for folks. Um, but I think for me, it definitely sits in that wholesome side of things because of the way that it addresses a lot of the themes, like mortality and everything.
I will say, from an accessibility point of view, there's room for improvement, in
Mhm.
my experience, but like. generally it's almost, again, and this falls back to what we were saying before, it's very rhythmic, right? Like you start to
Yeah.
learn the patterns, so you're like, right, okay, yep, swing, dodge, roll, swing, swing, like,
Hmm.
and that, yeah, it grooves very well. It's one of
Yeah.
the few games that I've 100%ed. Like I have to really like a game to want to
Wow.
100% something. Just because
Yeah, that
so
means a
so
lot.
many games, right? Like getting that
Yes.
little gold frame, I was like, excellent. Um, anyway, we've completely derailed Death Star. Anything else? Anything else that you sort of like is on your radar game wise?
Um,
I
it's
see.
I don't
I've
even think
Uno
they
reverse
have.
you because I'm like, what are your picks? What
Yeah.
gets the curator excited? Like,
I don't think they have. I'm trying to think if they have a release date announcement. I don't think they do at this point in time. Fields of Mystria is a I know there's been discourse lately and folks are like, "I'm tired of farming sims, like cozy games and farming sims." 2-1 note. Let me give you Fields of Mystria.
you can
I
wait.
think that
Can you hear that? It's the sound of everyone typing it on their keyboards.
yeah. So, for me and I understand the sentiment, because I think folks have seen the popularity of with any genre, with any game, if you start seeing the popularity of one, you'll see a lot of folks trying to emulate because they appreciate it, because they know the market's there for a variety of reasons. Um, Farming sims are no exception to that. So I do know that there are a wide variety of farming sims that don't provide that depth and the sort of fresh take on the genre that warrants a feeling of, oh, this game should be made, this game should be like really celebrated and explored deeply. um which again, sorry, I don't mean to say you shouldn't make a game because it's not deep. I'm saying like for those sort of commercial purposes of like, why make this game, what are you doing differently?
Oh, I mean,
um
we will quickly interject that,
yeah.
like, the games industry is a business. Look at all the absolute
Exactly.
turmoil that's happening and the dumpster fire that is also the business side of the
Hmm.
games industry. Because people that make good art should be well paid for that art.
Hmm.
Shareholders don't want to hear about it, so hashtag eat the rich. You know what I'm saying? As you were, Jenny. Sorry.
Exactly. Yes, no, I fully endorse that. Yeah, so I think make what you want to make, but I think one of the questions, especially consumers that I hear asking are like, why should we play this farming game? Like what makes it stand out? And I think there are a few farming sims that have really risen in my opinion in terms of that challenge of what are you bringing that's different and new to the table. Coral Island, which has already released, that's one of them for me because of its take with like its perspective on Indonesian culture and how it integrates that into the farming element along with just beautifully done visuals. um, Fields of Mystria, I think, is another fresh take. It's not out yet. I haven't played it, so take this with a grain of salt. But from what I can see, it not only really evokes the nostalgia of some of the original Harvest Moon games, and it clearly cites that as like sources of inspiration, but it brings in a 90s anime vibe to it
Hello.
that we have not yet gotten. Oh, if you are a person who enjoys like cute characters in games, romancing, thirst, this game has that for sure. So there is that. But I think this team in particular really understands the mechanical intricacies of farming games from what I can see. And they understand sort of this sort of fresh perspective on a visual aesthetic. And I think Fields of Mystria really does that in a way that makes me feel like, okay, yes, it's a farming sim, but I think this is worthwhile to explore.
So I'm about to blaspheme on my own show, but one of the problem I have with Stardew Valley is that it's it's too hard at the start. It's too grindy. It's too hard
Yeah.
to get a farm operational. The stamina's too low. It's so I don't know how to increase it properly. And I know I could just read a guide, right? I know Stardew Valley is a well made game that is enjoyed by many,
Mhm.
many people. I just struggle to get started. And then I get sad and
Mhm.
forget what I'm doing and then leave it because time, right? Conversely, and this is not a one to one comparison, but a farming sim that I really enjoyed was Moonstone Island because the farming was
Mhm.
actually like the farming was enough that like you could do some cool stuff with it. but it wasn't so vast I got overwhelmed.
Yeah. I think that's such a great point, because I think when folks look at Stardew Valley and they, especially developers, are trying to emulate it and they focus entirely on this, like, oh, we got to make this farming mechanic. I think we miss then these wonderful things that can happen with games like Moonstone Island, where, again, the fresh take that they bring is not only again, very wonderful pixel art aesthetic that looks distinct from Stardew Valley, but it also brings in that card. I feel like what is it? It was like the card almost deck building mechanic, Pokemon
Hmm.
mechanic, monster collecting one. So there's a bit more of a division between like the tasks that you're asked to do and some of the percentages of time you're allotting to them. And thus also the scaling of grind is a
Hmm.
little bit different, which is really nice. They also have a really interesting, I haven't played too much, but the dialogue and dating system is quite interesting. Because it
Jenny,
seemed like,
70
yeah.
hours
Oh
I put into
my
that game,
gosh.
and I did all but like some of the seed achievements. It's very good. You can romance anyone. You are a white haired. I love that it's a white haired main character, NB main character who can date anyone, and it's
Oh,
excellent.
that's wonderful. I will have to, because again, I only played maybe an hour or two, and it was one of those where I'm like, I know I'm gonna dig it, so I'm gonna hop back in when I have more time, and
Time.
time has not has not shown itself. So I need to just kind of make the time at this point.
And then
Wild,
we'll throw another one on the other end of this, where like say my partner was really enjoying Paleo Pines, which is a
yeah.
farming sim but dinosaurs.
Yes, exactly. And I think there's this element of like, for any developers who may be listening, there's an element that you always have to think about where it's like, what are we doing to change up the conversation? And then because again, from the consumer perspective, it's like, what is different? Like, why would I play this instead of a Stardew Valley? I think that's
Mhm.
always like the big question when you get into a genre that's like so beloved, especially for one particular title. Um, and that's not to say, again, if you're making games for fun, make whatever you want,
Mhm.
however deep you want. But I think I often think of things from that commercial perspective because of the work that I do and also the ways that I pay attention to how people give feedback on games, just because of that curation aspect. I find myself paying attention to that a lot. So just random dev feedback for questions to ask yourself if you ever want to make a game.
I mean, it's knowledge, right? You as I would say, spitting facts, right?
Trying,
Um,
trying to.
Now, one of my sort of favorite portions of the show, if you will, is I like to ask a couple of questions, and one is maybe we've kind of already touched on this, so correct me if the answer is not the video game cafe. But
Okay.
if you could do one project where you had unlimited access to resource, time, people, expertise, what would it be?
Video game cafe is the answer. I think having it would be this multifaceted thing though, right? Because I think having the video game book club, Geeks and Grounds, be like the cornerstone for community in this cafe would be a thing. I would love for it to just be I love the idea of physical community spaces. It's one that I think people are looking for now in ways that maybe they weren't a few years ago, um, and couldn't a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is just really intriguing to me. And I love having the physicality of a space where people can commune and gather and like eat snacks together and talk and have that be in person, but also appreciate the digital components, that we will never be able to escape at this point, but also the way that being online has been able to connect. I know for me with so many like so much of my friend group is from being online now. So I think the online video game cafe book club dream is what I would pursue.
But we'll give it a physical estate. Why not? Well, worldwide enterprise. Why not? It's blue sky, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, why not? Like, there's nothing better than getting together, getting your Game Boys, and using a link cable.
Oh my gosh, right? It's so nice. I miss that. Trading Pokemon, getting mad when your brother wouldn't trade it back. Yeah.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Yep.
This is the other question from this set, and it's probably my favorite because I've had such a great set of responses to it. but is there someone who, you'd like to give the equivalent of a digital hug to? Shine a spotlight on. You don't think they get enough credit or noise about them. When you want to give a shout out to, this can range. We've had
Mm,
people say their
mhm,
partners, their parents, anyone you want.
mhm. This is tough. I think I'd love to give a digital hug to my mom, who is not on any social media really.
Hmm.
Um, I think it feels so very cheesy and maybe cliche, but it's like I don't think I could have done anything I've done without my mom and the ways that she supported me, especially as I was younger. I joke because she's Korean, and so there are, of course, the jokes of like, "Oh, Korean Asian mom, you'd like gotta be a lawyer, you gotta be a doctor, like, if you don't get an A, you're in trouble." Like, there are certain elements of that, like, cliche that were sort of reality in my life, but I think she did an amazing job of not only trying to stay true to herself and like what she believed it was like the right way to sort of raise her kids being a single mom, but also trying to understand that like we lived in the USA and that there's this changing, like the internet was becoming a thing when I was growing up, where we were
Mm.
learning how to use the internet in school. And I really admire the way that I know that there are times where she was like, this, I don't know what's going on, but I'm gonna like just really try to do my best to support my kids. And yeah, I think she should definitely get a big digital hug, and I'll have to give her a real hug when I see her next. Because yeah, I don't
But
think I could have done this without her.
that's why I love this question. It just makes me feel so many things. Ah,
Yeah,
and this,
it's a good
it's
question.
my
I'm
show.
feeling
It's a
sentimental now.
podcast, but like I enjoy it just for me more than anything.
Yeah,
That was a good question. Good question.
it's a
Good
very good
answer.
question.
I'm saying question. I mean answer. You're the one. You're carrying this, not me. It was an excellent answer. I enjoyed it thusly. Now for more of a sort of fun, quick fire. You're going to a
Ooh,
biome of your choice. You can disclose what that is if you'd like. And you're going to take
mhm,
with you one album, one book, one film slash TV show, and one game. If it comes as a physical collection, or digital collection, you can take it. All the items and necessary
okay.
equipment that you take will work without restraint in your bio. But what are you taking
Mhm.
with you?
This is a tough question. One film
Or TV show?
or TV show. The TV show is what's throwing me for a loop because I'm like, do I bring something like The Office, which I already have on repeat just for noise in the house all the time? Um, I'll say I'm gonna bring Lord of the Rings, the deluxe, like, extended edition trilogy.
Okay. Oof.
It's
Solid.
incredible. Yeah, that's a good trilogy, doubles as a great soundtrack, so I've doubled up my album there. Um, and it's just I think it's aged still
This
quite well.
this was a point of contention on the show previously. Um,
Someone said it
uh,
did not age
oh
well.
no, like they took Lord of the
Oh,
Rings,
okay.
but then I said,
Oh,
"Are
okay.
you gonna take the Hobbit as well?" And that caused quite a kerfuffle.
I will not be including The Hobbit in my selection. We're gonna pretend that one doesn't exist. I'm sorry. The only good thing about The Hobbit, I'm sorry for anyone who loves The Hobbit. The only good thing I appreciated out of it was the dwarf song in the first Hobbit installation, right when they were singing the Lonely Mountains song, and
Hmm.
I was like, "Ooh, this is gonna be cool." And then no,
It
I'm
was
sorry.
not.
It just was not. It was not. Um, so yes, Lord of the Rings Deluxe Extended Edition proper, no Hobbit. What is it? You said one album. Oh, that's tough. Just because it's the album I've been listening to most, I think over the last year, it's just Undertale and Chill.
Okay.
I think it's like Jonas Monk Limbo. It's not the most like I think probably like a Janelle Monáe album would be like the other pick, but I think Undertale and Chill would serve me more long term in terms of like I just listen to that on the background all the time. I'm a big Undertale fan. Um which I know sometimes people are like, "Oh, Undertale fans, huh?" And I'm like, "No, no, no, there's you can be a fan of something and not be, like, too overbearing about it." But I will talk about Undertale to anyone who wants to. Um, book this is tough. I think have you which you may have read this because this is, I think, by a neuroscientist. I think he's a neuroscientist or psychologist. It's called Some 40 Tales from the Afterlife. Um, it's this collection of stories. Each one are maybe only a page, maybe 2 at the longest, and it's sort of this poetic melancholy, but some, like, sometimes darkly comedic or very comedic, imagining of what the afterlife could look at, and there's, like, 40 different imaginings of the afterlife. Beautiful. Some of those will bring me to tears, like, if I ever wanna cry, I can just, like, read it and I know I'm gonna cry because it's just so poignant. Um, so I think that one, because that's one that I very rarely will, like, buy multiple copies of a book.
Hmm.
I've bought maybe 5 copies of it because I've had a tendency to, like, give it to people and just be like, "No, just keep it. I'll just buy another copy. I want you to
Nice.
have it." So I think that would be my book is Some. Video game. Oh, save the hardest for last. I think
So people tend to go
Ooh,
down one of three routes. They tend to
yeah.
go
Oh,
for
yeah, give me
something that like
the
they haven't played and want to play because you're going for a holiday, right?
strat. Ooh,
Something
that's a
something
risky
that they
thing.
just know is massive and they're just gonna be able to play it, or
Mhm,
something that like
mhm,
they just know that they can replay over and over.
mhm.
The game might be endless, or they're just happy to do infinite loops.
Yeah. I think I would pick Final Fantasy X. I know I have to go with some sort of Final Fantasy or Chrono Cross. Secret of Mana, like, sort of that era of RPG and just I enjoy it so much. Final Fantasy X, I think, was really pivotal for me as a player. It was the first Final Fantasy, um, that I kind of owned outright,
Hmm.
that was, like, mine, and not that I didn't have to share it or anything like that, and, I think it's the first Final Fantasy that for me, which I didn't play 9 until later, but even 9, I'm like, "Hmm." The first Final Fantasy for me that I felt like there's a lot of just joyfulness in it that felt a little bit more colorful and vibrant than maybe some of the other Final Fantasies. Granted, I have not like, I haven't played 6, I haven't played there's a lot I haven't
Can
played,
anyone
but
else hear Tidus
I'm
laughing?
sorry. Um,
Ah!
it's such a good it's like, I know that moment is, like, cringe
In
meme,
context,
but
it
it's
actually
in
makes so much
context,
sense.
it's so good.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, yeah, Final Fantasy X. I also think Yuna is very underrated,
I'm
protagonist.
I'm
I think
about I'm
she's
about to ask another
amazing.
contentious question. Are you gonna take
Oh,
10
yeah.
too?
I am a 10-2 stan. I will
Oh,
fight
okay.
anyone. I
Okay.
will fight anyone who would love to well, I won't fight. I will hotly debate, the impact and significance of 10-2. I think it's so unapologetically magical girl in a lot of ways that I'm just like, "Please, 10-2, like, let's all get on the 10-2 train." More games need to look at 10-2 and say, "What could we learn from this and bring into our game development?" Very J-pop girl power. I love it. I think
I
10-2 is
do
great.
feel like most people's objection with 10-2 is that no spoilers, but it negatively impacts 10's story. Like if they just said
Mhm.
this is Final Fantasy 11, right, and just gave it a new cast, people might have
Mhm.
warmed to it a bit more, or they just said this is Final Fantasy J-pop, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I think I'm able to personally, like, separate out and be like, I'm gonna appreciate 10-2 for sort of, like, what it is in this little bubble, and I'm gonna keep the canon that I have for 10 just, like, in its own safe space.
fair.
But I think 10-2, I appreciate the experiment that they did with 10-2, and I hope they do more. I want Square to do more or Square Enix to do more weird things again. I will say, just to, like, bring this maybe into another contentious space, I feel like 16 I feel like it was maybe in some ways the least, like, imaginative Final Fantasy we've had in a long time, and I really want them to get weird. I want them to just go back to, like, yeah, again, the weird Final Fantasy that we know and love.
So this little sneak peek for you and the listeners, but like I'm
Oh,
doing
yeah.
I'm gonna do a slowly but surely a video series on 101 games to play if you haven't, and one of them is going to be on Final Fantasy, probably going to be the longest one. But I'm going to make an argument that actually, if you remove the numbering system and give them all subtitles, that some of which I believe to be hilarious, um, if you say like these are not games that are sequenced, remove the sequential nature,
Mhm.
people would view them more positively. Like if you pretend that they don't
Mm, mhm.
follow each other, they become better games. Because people's problem with 16 was this isn't a Final Fantasy as they knew it. But if you just said,
Yeah,
it's Final Fantasy, insert your own subtitle, right? Because I think we'll have a first person Final Fantasy eventually.
probably.
Because
I
they
think
they
the
want to
team
be
made
innovative,
it.
right?
Yeah, the team has made it clear that, and I definitely don't knock them trying new things. I also know, just as a personal bias, I'm not that interested in medieval settings, and so I know that was not gonna be kind of like how 9 actually took quite a while for me to warm up because it was very like, it had that medieval tinge even though it was very fantastical.
Mm-hmm.
I think 16 is the same where I'm just like, it's not a world that necessarily interests me. So I think it has that going against it for me from the jump. But I agree. I think it's nice that they are trying things. I know that they want to be innovative and they want to like try to push the definition of what it means. I would love them to just be a little bit more weird just cuz it's so fun. I think some of the most joyful moments we've had from Final Fantasy are the ones that are like out there, and I would love to see just a little bit of that selfishly.
Do you enjoy award-winning MMORPG Final Fantasy 14 online?
Yes, I am not a regular player because, again, time,
Mm-hmm.
is not something I have a ton of, but the time that I have spent with it, oh, love it. Because there are some funny, weird moments in that game, like, there's
Yes.
outlandish stuff that happens, so, yes, I very much love award-winning award-winning MMORPG,
I, I
Final
am I am
Fantasy.
a recent enjoyer of award-winning MMORPG Final Fantasy 14. Now with an expanded free trial, but it's
Exactly.
very good. Um,
Mhm.
I'm big fan, big fan. We have to limit
Yeah.
the consumption of Final Fantasy 14 online. Um,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
very good to have healthy boundaries and playtimes. I will also just
Yes.
say we this podcast we stan Ben Starr. Just gonna point that out. Um, big fan of Ben.
Yeah.
So just to reiterate, you taken Final Fantasy 10 too. That's sold as a
Yes.
digital bundle. Excellent,
Yes. Oh my gosh, thank you. You just gave me bonus game. So yes, I will take the bundle for sure.
excellent. That's a pretty solid set. Would what type of biome would you go for? I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna really
Mhm.
reach in this episode. I'm gonna say some type of woodland autumnal cottage.
Pretty spot on. Yeah, I was gonna say a cozy cabin in the woods, ideally in the autumn raining or winter and it's snowing. Um,
Nice.
I want there to be some sort of precipitation in the air.
So you really want to step into a Bob Ross painting?
Yes, please.
Yeah, nice. Okay, love it, love it. Just as we get towards the end of the episode, I like to invert the expectations of the listener and allow you to ask me a question. Please don't ask me about the PhD. Don't ask me
Oh,
the
that
biome
was
question because I've had those fairly recently. Um, and also what I'm looking forward to because of the nature of recording the podcast, it's still Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I am like scratching the days out on the calendar with zeal.
Mhm. I requested 2 days off just to be able to
Same.
play it.
Mine's gonna be Thursday. I'm gonna put like a post out on social, be like, "See you all Tuesday. If you don't hear from
Yep.
me, do not fear." Like, I'll be more than occupied.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, so you've eliminated some of the initial questions that I had. I'm curious about if you have any, because I think I love to read, and I'm curious if you have any book recommendations for folks who are interested in, especially what you do between psychology and video games. Because I think, again, going back to curation, there are so many books that you could just Google and be like, "The psychology of video games," but perhaps they're not the most friendly to either newcomers to the topic or maybe not the most engaging for newcomers to the topic. I'm curious, what would you recommend for folks to read if they wanted to start
Oh,
getting
I
into
mean,
just the topic?
yeah. If you want something that's really really, I don't want to recommend a textbook, but if you want something that's very introductory, Dr. Celia Hoden she has like a very textbook gamer and the brain book, but there's one that's just the psychology of games. It's part of a broader series of like psychology. There's
Mhm.
one like on like chess, right? And it's aimed to be the sort of, I think it's like
Wow.
200-page introduction to the field, right? And that's a
Mhm.
really nice, succinct way of doing it. If you then want to pick something else, there's so many people who've luckily all been guests on the show, but anything by Dr. Kelly Dunlap, Dr. Rachel Coa, the Zeitgeist of
Mhm.
Pop Culture series. If you want to dive into a pop culture series with some well sourced material, The Witcher is currently out. At the time of recording,
Ooh.
there are several more in production. You know, so like that's a great way to learn psychology things while also enjoying in a very friendly way. Like I am in the Witcher book, and my chapter was on ethics. Because really, really
That's
diving into our
cool.
lofty philosophical discussion, but like make it approachable, right? Like, well, be academic
Mhm.
in your citation of arguments, but present it as if we were on a podcast like
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna be pinging you later to, like, get the
this.
titles again, just because I wanna pick them up personally. I'm also curious, just what are you playing right now, and what's been exciting you currently?
So I am trying to get through a bit of the backlog, but I actually recently just finished a game called Dead End Job, which is
Oh,
like it's
yeah.
like a twin stick shooter. You play as Hector Plasm. Your colleague turned into a ghost. You have to try and help them. You kind of Luigi's Mansion esque. You shoot ghosts, you then vacuum them. It's very silly. It's very fourth wall, but it was something that just like, oh yeah, this is like gonna scratch an itch that I'm not gonna get. That was
Mhm.
really enjoyable. Death's Door was also really good.
Mhm.
I played a bit of Pizza Possum, also very enjoyable, fun.
Yes, that one looked very fun and silly.
Yeah, it's just whimsical, right? Like just if you're not
Yeah.
playing games to have fun, you're not playing them, right? Regardless of what fun looks like to you.
Yep,
So
agreed.
so yeah, I've been like consuming some more tapas esque kind of game experiences, right? Smaller
Yeah,
but very delicious. Because I've
I
literally
love
booked
that.
days off work for Rebirth, so that will be
Mhm.
much more of an entree and dessert, and then I'll get something to take home as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy that you're also just as excited about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, because 'cause I'm just like, again, it's all I can think about right now is how many days until I can just sit and play and just be back in that world.
I just I literally mentioned it in passing to a friend via text the other day, and then just, boom, essay, and then I was like, sorry, but that just happened. It's an auto reflex when I speak about the game, and then he was just like,
Mhm.
it's cool. I'm gonna enjoy playing it vicariously through you, and I was like, cool, cool beans.
That's amazing. I'm curious what this may step into some of the other podcasts or work that you do, but I'm curious what connects you most to Final Fantasy VII out of all of the Final Fantasy
So
games?
it's interesting that you asked that, but I think seven is the first one that I played, which by default makes it my
Mhm.
favorite, as is usually the way. Um, I objectively think nine is the best of the original up to 10, in my opinion.
Mhm.
But the game's really changed 10 and post, right? But
Right.
purely because I've beaten all of them. But it combines the elements the most. Seven and eight, they allow you
Mm.
to manipulate the characters into anyone you want. Nine goes back to classes.
Mhm.
Vivi, we must protect them at all costs.
Yes.
Um, I really enjoyed the steampunk element more than the medieval. The Chocobo mini game is the best. The soundtrack is like underrated bangers. Like Kuja is a really cool villain. Beatrix is great.
Mhm.
Like it also has like a really like just a fun energy about it. Like it's not it's prepared to be daft. you know, and I really
Mhm.
enjoyed that about it. While you again
Yeah.
touching on some really great points.
Yeah. I 9 was one that as a kid, again, I think my biased against more medieval feeling games stood out as more as a kid, and I hopped back into it as an adult when I was in college, or just finishing up college, and oh my gosh, it like, I think just the time to let my mind mature a little bit, I think it really hit different when I played it when I was older. So yeah, I definitely agree. 9 is an underrated Final Fantasy for sure.
I think objectively the best, like mechanically, we spoke about that, but like,
Mm,
and I also like yourself, I played it when I was much younger, and like I replayed it, and like it really touches on some massive themes. Like
yeah.
it's I'm gonna say it's dark. That's possibly not the best descriptor, but like it goes to some places with its narrative,
Mhm.
um, and that's really cool. And I love the Quinner as a non-binary character.
Yep.
A lot of people sleep on
Yep.
that.
Yep.
There is some fun like queer energy in there just for good measure, as everything. And
Yeah.
it just says, you know, maybe it was translation or whatever. Like it says like he she. You could just say they, but I loved it like just Quinner is non-binary and just part of the crew.
Yep. Agreed. Again, it's like this energy where I think there's this fun and joy and like I don't know, there's something about like 9 that I think still captures even in with the medieval thing that I'm just like I can embrace 9 because it has this like element of just I don't know, this je ne sais quoi. I
the
can't put it into
the
words.
je ne sais quoi. Yeah, truly.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. Like seven is my favorite. Like the fact that
Yeah.
we're here now at the 27th anniversary of its original release, and we do
Oh my
not know what
gosh.
is coming next is
I
astounding.
know.
Like
Oh.
that is truly bless you. Um,
Excuse me. Sorry.
bless you. Truly a marvel in its multimedia conception and expectation, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
wonderful. Um, but like, yeah, I think 9 is just the crown and one. The 10 and onwards. I mean, like, is it cheesy to just say 14 is probably the best because it's 14, right? Like,
I mean, it's 14. Yeah.
how do you argue against, right? Like,
Yeah. See, I've had this long time goal that I've been wanting to do where I'm calling it the Final Fantasy, where I'm like actually gonna go through and play through every single Final Fantasy mainline Final Fantasy game. And now talking, I'm like, maybe I try it. Maybe is this the year
I
where I
mean,
start poking away at that goal?
which version though? Like this, you'd benefit from my video, Jenny. Like,
I know. I'm like, you should
do
please
you
export that as soon as
do you
possible.
go down the pixel remaster route? Do you try and get some of the ultimate versions on other platforms? Like, what's
I
their
know.
availability? Like the questions,
Right? Oh my gosh,
because
yeah.
like,
I will say the Pixel remaster for me, just probably because of the availability question and being
yeah,
able to take it on the go. But yeah, no, I that's why I've looked at this as this personal project for a long time. And every time I'm like getting into the logistics, I get into the weeds of all the questions you just asked. I'm like, maybe I'll just start it later.
I think if I could have told, I might have said this before on the show, but if I could have told childhood me that I would have
hmm
Final Fantasies 1 through 12, sans 11 on a portable console, Nintendo Switch, my childhood self would not believe. They'd be like, "What fantasy land are you? What reality are you in, mate?" I bet. Well, no, I'm from the future. That's
Right.
how time travel works. You'll learn. You'll get it. You like sci-fi, but like like just the fact that I can do that, astonishing. Like we've reached the peak of wherever we're gonna be.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love it. It's a good time to be playing games.
I can take all those Final Fantasies wherever and so much more.
Yep.
Like I actually, I want to be conscious of your time, but like I actually attempted a soft speed run of Final Fantasy VII when I was on a flight to Seattle for West. I was just
Wow.
like, you know what? I'm gonna be sat here for like 9 hours. Let's see if we rush. We use time three.
Seems
Let's see
about
if we
right.
can do it.
How far
Right.
did you get?
So I did suffer one unfortunate crash, but I think I got to um just after Forgotten Capital, I think.
Okay. That's pretty good,
Smashed
I
like
would
disc
say.
disc one. It might have been a bit further. I actually can't remember, but I didn't quite finish it.
Yeah.
Once you get to that point, like there's only the huge materia quest, and if you just go straight to North Crater, once you do the Midgar raid, I was
Yeah.
close. I was close.
Yeah. I was gonna say that's not bad for a single flight.
I know, right? Anywho, listen, Jenny, this has been wonderful. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you have as well. I hope everyone listening along has. But like all good things, this episode must come to an end. So I want to thank you again for joining me, Jenny. It's been a real pleasure,
Hmm.
a delight, and I
Thank
feel
you.
like there's something in here for everyone. There's so much knowledge to be instilled and distilled.
Thank you. Yeah, I've had a great time. Any time I get to chat with you is a joy. So thank you for having me.
You're too kind. All that remains for the people watching along is I'm going to press that button so that the screen changes. But otherwise, as we always say on this show, until next time, look after your mind, body, and soul. We'll see you again. Bye bye.